people with real jobs.
Hello?
Self-employed people. Which do you want to be? This is Certifiably Unemployable. It's time to fire the boss and become self-employed. Maybe you need a push to get that business or side gig going that you've been dreaming about for years. And if you're an entrepreneur, you can listen to stories and get experience from people who've done it. Get ready to change your life. Broadcasting from the compound, this is Certifiably Unemployable, and this is Sean Dean.
Welcome to Certifiably Unemployable. I am your host, Sean Dean, and thank you once again for joining us this week. This is part 2 of our Mindset series with Jarrod Haning. And just to kind of give you a quick rundown of who Jarrod is, he is an award-winning speaker. He's been featured on ABC Nightline, spoken on stages all across the country, has clients all across the world, has delivered 4 TEDx talks related to mindset performance, and has been chosen by TED Global as the featured speaker of the week. He specializes in a Nobel-nominated process that teaches you how to think at a higher level and allows you to access different parts of your brain on demand. And as a result of this training, most of his clients go on to double their income by purposely working half as many hours. His background as a classically trained musician has equipped him with a unique set of tools for leveling up your leadership. For recreation, you'll find him flying, skydiving, mountain bike riding, but his most prized accomplishment, which I find this rather humorous, he's the world tickle champion in the 5-year-old category. So I have never met a world champion tickler, Jarrod. So I am privileged as I now know one. And so I want to hear a little bit about that. And then there's a couple of other things I wanted to ask you about as well before we get on today's topic. How are you, Jarrod? Welcome back to Certifiably Unemployable.
Hello, good to be here. I was distracted listening to the tonality of your voice, wondering, it sounds like you've done radio before.
Maybe once or twice, maybe.
I feel like I should capture that recording and use it in all of my marketing materials. You make me sound like I'm entering the UFC ring or something.
That's it. You just got to put a little Rocky music behind it and you're great, man.
Oh, wow.
Perfect. So tell us about the 5-year-old tickle championship. What's that all about?
It's a fictitious title that I gave myself because nobody had given it to me and I just wanted it.
I love it. It's perfect. Hey, and you know what? Why not, right? Why not? So the other thing I wanted to ask you about was, so because of the relation of our topic today, you've performed on 7 different instruments in 14 different symphonies. So what are those 7 instruments?
Oh, golly, the list has probably grown since now, but
since now or since then?
Yes, essentially, if you're not in it, it seems like a really big deal, but when you're in it, it's kind of all the same. So playing the violin or the viola or the cello or the bass, they're all kind of played similarly.
Right.
Like the guitar and the mandolin and the ukulele and the, dobro and the banjo. They're all kind of played similarly. The piano and the accordion, they're very similar. But I've sat in with groups on accordion. I've got a embarrassing and hilarious story of playing the cello with the symphony. Funny because I don't actually play the cello. Of course, violin, viola. I've done a lot with guitar, ukulele, mandolin. I already mentioned accordion, piano, symphonies. Golly, I've played in symphonies in New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. Am I leaving anybody out? I think that I might have hit Alabama once, but that's most of the symphonies, or the states that the symphonies were in. And then of course, all the little cities, every city's got their own symphony.
Right. That's awesome. So that's going to segue us into today's topic. It's how to double your income without raising your prices, getting more clients, or working more hours. And specifically, you're going to be really talking to freelance artists, actors, singers, musicians, symphony artists, people that are in the performing arts space. Last episode, we talked about what's going on during the pandemic and how Broadway specifically is closed through the end of May of 2021. So naturally, as an artist, as a performer, you have to get creative. You have to figure things out. And since we're talking about mindset, and since we're talking about the talents of string musicians, let's talk about this topic: how to double your income without raising your prices, getting more clients, or working more hours. What you got for us?
Yes. And hopefully your small business owners, your entrepreneurial audience, hopefully they have made it this far, because what I'm going to say applies to their business as well. If they will just do these 3 things, they will be killing it next year, and also set themselves up good for retirement as well.
Perfect.
So I was full-time. I was full-time classical music for 20 years, and I got really tired of working a lot of hours, not making enough money. At that time, I was working about 40 hours a week, and I was making about $50,000 a year. Now, classical music, freelance music, the arts, generally speaking, is just not set up to make a lot of money. It's set up to kind of scramble and string together a lot of small gigs. And I was getting tired of that. So I made these 3 changes, and anybody in the arts can do this. Even if your art is like knitting or poetry or painting, anybody in business could do this. Chiropractors could do this. Lawyers could do this. Real estate agents could do this. So the first thing is teach what you know without your time. Like, take your time out of the equation when it comes to teaching what you know. So in my case, as a freelance musician, I was teaching private lessons. The problem was, if I wanted to make more money, I had to teach more lessons. I had to work more hours. And if you're doing the work, you're falling behind. And if your solution is I need to work more, that's a clue that your strategy is actually the wrong strategy. It's just going to lead to a dead-end road of burnout. But there I was. I wanted to make more. So in order to make more, I had to teach more lessons. Well, the first change, take your time out of that equation. Now, if you are a coffee shop owner, what could you teach other coffee shop owners about attracting new customers to your shop? If you're a dentist, what could you teach other new dentists about attracting new clients into your practice? If you're a lawyer, what could you teach other lawyers? So just teach what you know, but teach it in a way that it takes your time out of the equation. So at that time, I was teaching lessons one-on-one. So it took all of my time for the whole hour. So how else can you teach what you know? How else can people pay you for your knowledge in a way that takes your time out of the equation? Well, you could do downloadable stuff online. You could do video courses. You could do email courses. You could do like YouTube paid series of channels. You could do Udemy or the education platforms. You could do any of that, sure. You could also write the book about it. You could write the manual about it. You could write the material that becomes the teaching source book for all the other colleges and universities and high schools that are training in that subject. You could write the manual. That's one way you could do it. You could also do group. Instead of teaching one-on-one or consulting one-on-one, you could only do one-on-many. And there's no limit on the number of people you can put in your group. And now you're able to reach more people without working more hours. Well, in my case, what I opted to do was to move from one-on-one to the doctor hallway. When you go see the doctor, they don't check you in. They don't schedule you, reschedule you, help you get your medicine. They don't take your vitals. They don't ask you where it hurts. They don't do any of that.
Right.
They walk in the room for like 3 minutes and you spill your story and they go, great, my assistant will help you with what you need to do. And they leave. Right. That's it. That's it. Okay. So if you're teaching what you know, you are the expert. Well, in my case with music, my students didn't need me to help them unpack their instrument or to tune or to warm up. They needed me to diagnose the one exercise that will build the one skill that was missing. That was my job. So they would do that, warm up, tune, get their instrument out, while I was in another room diagnosing and getting that exercise ready to go for that person. And I would have multiple students on different sides of the hallway, and I would just go in and out the rooms. So now I'm able to reach more people without needing to work more hours. And doing this in the way where I didn't have to raise my prices. So I'm making more, but my students aren't paying more. Parents were thrilled. Now, if you're in the arts, you've probably at one point had private lessons in your life.
Right.
And you can relate to the misery that is your teacher says, okay, now your turn. And you go to play and your fingers are just about over the keys when your teacher interrupts you and goes, no, 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 like this. Like, for crying out loud, at least give me a chance to get started. It's the first time you've even tried it, right? So the constant teacher interruptions, that's a mess. Well, my students didn't have that. I was out of the room while they were practicing the exercise. They had the chance to practice it with peace of mind, not like me observing their very first errors. They had a chance to get momentum. They loved it. Their parents loved it. Their parents raved. They were like, oh my gosh, if my teacher was like this as a kid, I would still be playing. This is the best way to teach ever. Then I'd hop back in the room, make sure they understood it, make sure they were doing it right, go back and forth. And so I was in and out that way. This allowed me to double my teaching revenue without working more hours or without charging more. And whatever field you're in, how can people pay you for your knowledge in a way that doesn't suck up all your time? Whether you're speaking to audiences, whether you've got a podcast or a YouTube channel or a book or whatever it is, teach what you know, take your time out of the scale. That's the first change that I made. The second change is, if you're teaching what you know, your students are going to need stuff. In my case, in music, they need instruments, they need accessories, they need music, they need like supplies, right?
Right.
If you're in the dance world, you know this, and you are making a killing selling dance costumes to all the, or cheerleading costumes or whatever it is. If you're in the martial arts world, you know this, you're making a killing selling martial arts uniforms. And so it's the same with music though. They're going to need instruments and accessories in order to succeed. Well, when they come to you because they want your knowledge or your help learning that skill, they know, like, and trust you. What I used to do was they would come to me and say, hey, we have some extra money burning a hole in our pocket. What should we do with it? And I would say, oh gosh, don't give me your extra money. Take it down the road and give it to the music store. That's the dumbest thing ever.
Yeah.
So I spent the 15 minutes needed to fill out the retail license for my state. And then I called up the music suppliers. I was like, hey, I like your stuff. I want to give it to my students. They said, great. Call us up when you need something. I didn't have to warehouse anything. My students would come in and say, how do we solve this problem? What do we need? I would say, come back next week. I'll have one for you. That one move put an extra 25,000 into my pipeline without working any more hours because my students were already there. So we have one, how do you teach what you know in a way that takes your time out of the equation? Mm-hmm. One on mini, one on group, or one on course, selling courses. Two, how do you equip your students with what they need? Now, obviously, at a low level, you can just go to Amazon and get an affiliate link. At a mid-range level, you can call up the suppliers and get affiliate links, something like that. And at a little bit higher level, you can go full retail and just ship it direct. But whether you are in the coffee shop business, what kind of hardware are they going to need? Like what kind of cash register, what kind of espresso machine, what kind of grinder they're going to need, what kind of beans. If you're in the dentist space, what kind of drills and saws and suction and squirt guns and all that are they going to need? And just let them get that through you by calling the supplier and saying, hey, I've got a group of 10 dentists that I'm teaching how to increase their revenue. I'd like to get them access to your products. Do you have an affiliate link I can use? That's it. So we have teaching, we have retail, and then the last one is opportunity. So as my students get better and better, they need opportunities to perform. Well, back in the day, I was playing gigs. So if I wanted to make more money, I had to play more gigs. This is back to solving a bad strategy with stubbornness. If it requires more effort, you're going down the wrong road.
Right.
What I did instead of playing gigs is I started booking gigs. Now there's no limit on the gigs that I can book, but there's a hard limit on the gigs that I can play. So as my students would start coming up, I would give them the opportunity to play those gigs. Now the customers, they know, like, and trust me, so they know, like, and trust my recommendation. In the beginning, I would give my customers a price break. You know, do you want my apprentice or do you want my pro? My pro would be my peers in the symphony, and my apprentice would be like my high school and college students, and they would get to choose. And then as they got older and better, I just moved them up to the pro category. But this way, I was able to effectively play more gigs because I was in the booking space. So if you are in the barista space and you're teaching other coffee shop owners how to get more clients in the door, and you're giving them access to the best equipment, the best beans at the best wholesale prices, well, your students are going to rise up and become superstars. Some of your students are going to get this, actually do what you suggest, and they're going to actually get results. Well, those now become future consultants for your business. So we're taking more of your time out of the equation because they're going to teach for you and they're going to speak for you. And that's how we can reach more people by working less hours.
I love it. You know, we did some similar things when we started our event business years ago with our DJ business. You know, we were in face with the client, with the bride and groom or the corporate event, and they would need photography or they would need a musician for their cocktail hour. Well, we're already providing their DJ services for the reception. So why not kick in and say, well, I know some violinists, I know some harpists, I know some string trios, so I'll book them for you, make a small portion just to, because a lot of people, number one, they don't want to deal with it. Number two, they don't even know where to go. So they're going to ask you for the referral anyway. So those are 100% solid. I love them because they make a lot of sense. And what you're doing is you're taking your time and you're shifting it and you're allowing yourself to be the most effective, which you really touched on a lot on episode number 1. So speaking of episode number 1, we talked about the mind scan, and we talked about what really that is. And of course, you know, people have an opportunity to go through this with you, but it all boils down to your quote on your bio here: a breakthrough in your business will first happen as a breakthrough in your thinking. So you have to make sure that it shifts properly, and you have to understand what your value is, what you're getting paid for. That's what you did as a music teacher. Is, well, they don't need me to take their instrument out of their case, tune it, do all that. They can practice all these things. I'll come in, help them fine tune it, move on to my next student. Meanwhile, everybody's doing all the same thing. So I love it. So I have a question for you. The mind scan, how does that connect your brain on music? All right. So what is the connection between your brain on music and your brain on the mind scan?
So some people don't know this about music, but when you're engaged in making music, you're using more different parts of your brain than any other part of your life. This is well documented with MRI studies. And this is a sharp contrast with athletic performance, where the better your body is performing athletically, the less of your brain it's using, because it can't afford to send the glucose to the brain. The glucose needs to go to the muscles. This does not mean that music is better than athletic behavior. It doesn't mean that music is better for your brain than athletic behavior. I mean, they both serve a good purpose. What it does mean, though, is if you could access different parts of your brain on demand for different areas of your life, it would open up new avenues for innovation or productivity or fulfillment or purpose or power. So what I do is I teach people how to access different parts of their brain on demand. And one of the things that we do is we start with a tool called the mind scan. This was a Nobel-nominated process that was invented in the 1950s by Robert Hartman, and it maps out your thinking patterns. By getting your thinking patterns mapped out, we're able to see where the blind spot is that's been tripping you up in your growth. If you have cycles that are a hamster wheel, every year you make the same amount of money, you're not growing. During the year, you always have more on your to-do list than you have time to get done. Working harder and faster isn't clearing it up. If you keep hitting the same obstacles, it's not because you're not working hard. It just means there's something about that your mind hasn't seen yet. So by teaching you how to access different parts of your brain on demand, we're able to tap into effectively a genius in you and a higher level of thinking. But all that starts with mapping out your thinking patterns with the mind scan so we can see where you're currently starting and chart the best course for where you want to go.
Okay. And of course, as we wrap up today's show, later on, we'll talk more about your book, how to access that. And we will also talk about what someone needs to do to get their own mind scan. So that way they can actually allow themselves to understand what's going on with their mind and how it's working. One of the things that I notice a lot as a performer and as somebody who's around a lot of performers, there is a tendency for a lot of people I know to have anxiety in many ways, and I see it a lot in performers. Does that have any? Is that something that people can understand more with the mind scan? I mean, how have you noticed anxiety when it comes to being a musician, performer, things like that? Because I know we touched base briefly on that in some of the notes that we had. So they've got to be tied somehow. And maybe you can clear that up for me, because I see that a lot.
Yeah. So the mind scan, I would say it's the most beneficial for entrepreneurs, small business owners who feel life's calling them to step up to something bigger, but they keep hitting the same obstacles.
Right.
And they'd like to see what their potential is and how to get there. I think the mindset's great for that. And for that matter, most of my clients normally double their business revenue in the first year by purposely working half as many hours, because the mind scan and going through that process taught them how to think at a higher level.
Okay.
That's a little bit different issue, maximizing your potential from your performance under pressure. And yeah, as a classical musician, I had horrible stage fright. I had it for 9/10 of my career. And all the advice about stage fright is crap. It doesn't work. It makes the situation worse. Eat a banana, be sure you're well prepared, study your notes, imagine the audience in their underwear, just do your best. All that's crap.
Yeah.
It makes it worse. It makes it worse. So I was battling that, and it was so bad for me that whenever I would have to perform under pressure, like play a recital or an audition or a solo with the symphony or whatever, I would feel so miserable during that process that I would want to sell my instrument and quit music afterwards. Like I do not ever want to go through that again. But that was my life for like 19 out of 20 years, until I realized that what works in business also works in music. So at that time, I had been training people in the musical secrets of leadership and the musical secrets of productivity. And it dawned on me, wait a minute, what if I apply one of those principles to what I'm experiencing here with stage fright? So one of the principles is the only reason you have the problems you do, whatever your problems are, is because you don't have bigger problems. When you're up to something bigger, your current problems kind of become small potatoes.
Yeah, that's a good one.
My friends that are trying to lose weight, well, they keep struggling with losing weight. They start a program, they quit a program. However, my friends that have decided they're going to run a triathlon that year, they no longer struggle with their weight because they're up to something bigger. And it's not because they have more discipline or willpower or focus. It's because they have a bigger problem. How am I going to stay alive for 120 miles one day? Because of that, their brain, their life is just operating at a higher level. Now, as soon as triathlon season is over, yeah, they're happy to meet me at the donut shop because they're no longer up to something bigger.
Right.
So in music, how do I apply being up to something bigger to make stage fright small potatoes? I'm sitting on stage and I've got like 30 seconds. The orchestra's playing away. My solo's coming up and I'm starting the whole panic attack crap. I'm like, wait a minute, wait. How about I just practice what I preach? I'm going to try this principle out, see if it works for stage fright too. So what I did is I looked at the music and I asked myself, why do I want to share this with the audience? Why do I even care that they experience this passage? And this was a question I had never asked before, because up to that point, I'm trying all the advice. Play your best, just read the music, focus on getting the notes right, do your best. And it's impossible because there is no best. There is no point in time which you can say, aha, this was my best. There is no perfect. There is no good enough. There's no line in the sand that you can cross and say, okay, at this point, it was perfect. At this point, it was good enough. And the problem is we have this game of withholding in our head where we say, after I've achieved this immeasurable, unattainable target of being my best, playing my best, looking good, avoiding looking bad, not making any mistakes, playing perfect, getting all the notes right, whatever it is, then I will give myself permission to feel good enough, loved, significant, happy, whatever it is. Well, the problem is the goal that we're chasing doesn't exist. There's no point that we cross it. And so we have this game of withholding the very building blocks that cause human beings to work, withholding that from ourselves, and then expecting ourselves to perform at a higher level. It just doesn't work that way. So what did I want for the audience? And I can't tell you why, but for some reason, as I looked at that passage of music while the orchestra's playing and my solo's coming up, I realized that I wanted the audience to have the felt experience of being loved. I can't tell you why, but for me, that's what the passage spoke of. So I decided that I was going to be up to something bigger. I was no longer going to be about the business of trying to get all the notes right, of trying to play my best, of trying to do it perfectly, of trying to look good. No longer in that business. I was now going to be about the business of my audience having the felt experience of being loved. This was a completely different game, and this is a game that I had never played until this moment. So what happens is I launch into my first note of the solo, and my brain fires off the network. You might miss this note. And I had to recommit myself to the new game. I don't care if I miss this note because I'm no longer in the business of trying to get the notes right and play my best. I'm in the business of standing for what's possible in my audience's life. Right. And I'd go into the next note and my brain would, I think that's a little out of tune. And I'd say, I don't care because I'm no longer in the business of trying to get all the notes right and play this perfect and play my best. I'm standing for what's possible in my audience's life. Completely different game. What happened though is I had to recommit myself every single note to being about something bigger. At the end of it though, not only did I play my best under pressure that I had never done before, but here's the real miracle. I felt my best under pressure. I actually wanted to do it again. And at no time had I ever played a solo and left feeling like I wanted to do it again. For me, that was the real victory, but it came about because I took on a bigger problem. By the way, this is the same way that Gandhi conquered stage fright in his life. Many people don't know this, but Gandhi, the guy who spoke so powerfully that he united an entire country divided by civil war, started out terrified of speaking in public. And he conquered his fear the same way I did on stage that day.
That's cool. And being a performer, Jarrod, I can tell you, I can attest to the feeling it is understanding the instant gratification you get just from the reaction of the audience. And I've had performances before where maybe I wasn't feeling quite right. I was a little under weather, or I felt like my throat was not right and I was going to start singing and something was not going to happen the way I wanted it to happen. So I had to learn, as you were stating, I had to think about other things. Listen, I've been practicing this so much. I know what to do. I'm just going to go out there and give it my best, but I just want to make the audience happy. And when you can walk up the stage and say, I left everything I had on the stage, it just feels so good. So great advice. I love it. So as a performer, maybe somebody who is not someone that is coaching or teaching, or they have students, taking what we talked about today, what can they do tomorrow to make things better for them, continue to work the same amount of hours, but bring in more cash flow?
All right. So this is how the principle applies when you're not dealing with stage fright, when you're dealing with income, when you're dealing with relationship, when you're dealing with not having enough time. The principle for stage fright was you only have that problem being afraid of performing in public or giving a speech in public. You'll only have that problem because you're not up to something bigger. When Gandhi took on peace for an entire nation, he stopped being afraid of giving speeches in front of 20,000 people because he was about something bigger. So if you are dealing with your relationship with your teenage son, if you're dealing with losing your job in your middle years and you don't have retirement and you have to start over and it feels like it's too late to start over, if you're dealing with always having more on your to-do list than you have time to get done, whatever the heck it is, the only reason you have that problem is because you're not up to something bigger. So what you do instead is commit to writing the book. So if it's your teenage relationship, son, daughter, whatever it is, you go on Facebook and you say, hey guys, my new book on success with your teenage daughter is coming out in December. Be on the lookout. Now you've got some skin in the game. And now you're going to go write the book on success with your teenage daughter, and you've got 30 days to do it. You aren't writing the book because you have the answer. You're writing the book because you're committed to allowing the answer to flow through you for all the other families out there that have the same problem. Now you're playing a bigger game. You're up to something bigger. And because of that, your brain is operating at a higher level. You become far more resourceful.
You have to commit, make the commitment, and you got to be accountable. And just stepping out there, making that announcement, especially on something like Facebook or social media, now you have that accountability. So I like that. That's fantastic advice. So let's talk about the next step. And again, keep in mind, if you're listening to this at this point, and maybe you're not a musician and you're not an actor, you're not a singer, you're not a orchestra player, this applies to entrepreneurs 100%, anybody self-employed. The reason why this topic was so had such a resignation with the whole freelance was prior to our conversation, we had talked about, artists and him being a musician, I having experience in theater and acting and performing. I know that there's a big group out there right now that need a little extra love. But as entrepreneurs, you can apply this to anything. So what's the next step on them reaching out to you, getting the mind scan, whether they're a musician or just an entrepreneur, maybe someone getting started or someone that's been a long time entrepreneur that just needs that reset in their life? What's the next step on reaching you?
So if you're curious what potential, what untapped hidden nuggets lie in your own mindset and how that might affect your life, your sense of free time, your sense of income, how it might affect the potential of your business, come over to mindsetperformance.co. You can learn more about the mind scan. You can download a sample report. Heck, you can even try it out, see what's going on. And you don't need to be a client of mine to take the mind scan. You can take it, get all the results from it, go apply them yourself, go get them. If you're interested in learning more about the difference it's made in people's lives and how they applied the insights from their mind scan, you want to look over their shoulder, just download the executive summary for my book. And if you want to listen to case studies of people that have gone through it and how they're applying it in their business, you can check out my podcast, all available at mindsetperformance.co.
Sounds great. So speaking of the mindsetperformance.co, the book, the executive summary of thinking patterns of success, I will make sure I post a link here so you can click on that because we see the book right behind you there, Jarrod. And speaking of the mind scan, after the previous episode, I went ahead and I did my own mind scan. I just set up a time before we started recording today's episode to go over what's going on with my brain. I know people are thinking, oh boy, that ought to be interesting. But I'm excited because when I took the mind scan, I'm like, wow, this is kind of interesting. It's actually very interesting. So I encourage you to go to his website, mindperformance.co, take the mind scan, but check out that executive summary of the book because you don't want to miss a beat with Jarrod. Now, we do have part 3 coming up. It's part of our mindset series with Jarrod Haning. And part 3 is going to be how your brain turns language into emotion and how to leverage this for success. Do you want to maybe give us a brief summary on what that's about?
Yes. When we look at relationship, it all comes down to language and communication. But what's weird is when we look at money and time, also, they all flow through language and communication. They aren't resources we have. They're resources we create through the quality of our communication. So in our next episode, we're going to dive in to how your brain turns sound, whether it's music or language, how it turns it into emotion. Very important because the quality of your day, the quality of your experience with time, money, relationships comes down to the quality of the emotions that you experienced during that day. So in our next episode, I'm going to show you not only what's going on, but how you can effectively hack that for better experience in language, relationships, with time, and money. Join us.
All right, fantastic. We appreciate it. Once again, thank you for joining us on Certifiably Unemployable, Jarrod, and we look forward to episode number 3. And of course, I know it's not going to stop there. Just based on our conversations up to this point, we will find another topic because I think you're a great guest. You got a lot of knowledge, and I can tell you're very passionate about it. So thank you for that so much.
Thank you, sir.
All right, don't forget to leave comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this information. This is Certifiably Unemployable, and until next time.
You've been listening to Certifiably Unemployable. Ready to fire the boss yet? You're on your way. Sean has been self-employed for over 20 years. So if that's something that you want to do, something you've been dreaming about for years, Sean has all the knowledge, good, bad, and indifferent. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on Facebook and Instagram at Certifiably Unemployable. Find us on YouTube and at www.certifiablyunemployable.com. Till next time, this is Certifiably Unemployable, signing off.